The lovely Clare Thompson talking. Last night she came into the kitchen and was speaking to me and Pip and was like, just bought some brand new pink and gold Adidas sliders. And I was like, I'm so glad that the leader of my church is a slider wearer. I wouldn't have it any other way. So yeah, I'm just going to pray for you, Claire, quickly.
Hello.
There she is. Lord, thank you so much for Claire. Thank you that she her heart just burns for the church, for the wholeness of all of us, and that is massively in her heart to do. And thank you that she's such an amazing communicator. And I just pray today that what she has to say will really bless everyone here, and it'll be something we can take out to the people around us in the community. So, amen.
Amen. I was going to wear the sliders today, but it's freezing. I'm so glad I didn't, because in here it's so cold. In fact, I'm going to say to everybody in the room, you guys who are on Zoom, if you haven't got your communion yet, I'm going to give you a minute to go and get it, because in the room we're just going to stand up and sort of jump for about 20 seconds because it's so cold in here, and you're going to have to sit for another 20 minutes while I'm talking. So jump, everybody, move around, wave your arms, get some energy. You don't know how lucky you are there in your nice warm homes, everybody, with your blankets over your knees. Great. Okay, that'll do. Whew, that's better. So we have been having this amazing series of testimonies, and I think all of us have just absolutely loved hearing your stories. I mean, give us a wave on the screen if you have enjoyed those testimonies, because we had about 5 before Christmas and 5 after, and we've got one more next week, and it's going to be Daisy, who is, how old is Daisy? 14? 17? Well, I don't know. She's a teenager. So she's going to share her testimony, and that's going to be the last one in this series. So that's really exciting. But we're just having a little pause, and I'm going to just say a few thoughts. And then after that, we are going to be heading towards Easter and just thinking about what it means to follow Jesus towards the cross. But today I'm just going to share a few thoughts. And the first thing I'm going to do is do a reading. And there's 2 little sections. Have you got that reading? Yeah. 2 sections from the gospel, and these are epic stories that actually they're just little snippets from the stories, but you'll recognize them if you've read the gospels at all. And if you're not familiar with the gospels and familiar with reading the Bibles, you've got to know really that these are 2 very, very, very well-known stories, and they're very well-known people. It's all centering around 2 women who are they're kind of like amongst the female heroes of the Bible, 2 followers of Jesus. The Bible's full of male heroes. There's a handful of women who are just extraordinary, and these are 2 big ones. Okay, it's Mary and Martha, and so we're just going to read a little bit from their 2 stories. Do you want to put that up, Nick? And I'll read from the screen, I think. Okay, so this is Mary and Martha. Mary and Martha's home in a place called Bethany, which was like a favored place, one of the places where Jesus hung out as with his friends. So as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. And she came to him and she said, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Okay, fast forward. We don't know how long, a few months maybe, or within the next 2 years. It's really hard to string together the timeline of some of these things. But this event is, again, like a absolute pinnacle in in several of the Gospels. And it was also the event that catastrophically started the run-up to Jesus' arrest and crucifixion. It's kind of the thing that triggered everyone and the authorities, the Pharisees, to saying, this can't go any longer, we've got to get rid of this man. So this is the raising of Lazarus, and this is the end of the story, but you're going to hear a little bit more about the earlier bit in a minute. So a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her Martha. Fast forward a few things that happened. Next one. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. So Lazarus has died. He's in a tomb. It was a cave with a stone that had a stone across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, same Martha who was complaining to Jesus at that time before. By this time, there's a bad odor, for he's been there 4 days. And Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I know you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me. When he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. I mean, that is an epic moment in the Gospels. And I mean, you've got to imagine it. I totally believe that was a historic event, that they rolled this grave stone away, and Jesus called into the gloom of that cave, and people were watching, thinking there's a smelly, decaying corpse that's 4 days in that grave. And suddenly this man appears, and he's wearing grave clothes. Those grave clothes would have been like strips of cloth all around him. He would have looked like a zombie. And he comes to the entrance of the cave, and Jesus says, take off the grave clothes, let him go. Totally epic moment. And it's from the lives of these two women, Mary and Martha. I want to focus on them, and I want to say to you, first of all, this is not a story for women. It's often, how many times have I heard Mary and Martha being talked about at women's conference? It's like women sort of own the story, but actually it's not. It's a very deeply challenging story for everyone who is trying to follow Jesus. It is challenging for you, whether you're male or female. Now, one of the things that happens, I think, in the telling of these stories of Mary and Martha is that Martha gets the bad rap and Mary gets the good rap. Mary's the one who sits at the feet of Jesus, and, you know, she gets it right. And Martha gets a bit rebuked by Jesus on that day. And so we tend to sort of think Martha, annoying, irritating, a bit too busy, doesn't get it. Mary, holy, contemplative, at the feet of Jesus, gets it right. So I totally disagree. And I think what you see in the Gospels is you see an unfolding story in the lives of the people that were hanging around Jesus and with him and following him. And what you see is they start to change. Next thing I want to show you is this strange and obscure picture. I wonder if anyone knows what this picture is. Centrifuge. People recognize that at all? Put your hand up if you've seen a centrifuge before. It's weird, isn't it? Okay, so this is a centrifuge, you're totally right. And basically, when I was about 8 or 9, my dad worked at worked at the university. He was a lecturer in biochemistry, but he worked at the university because he was studying and researching blood, cholesterol levels in blood back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, actually not 90s, 80s. And when I was about 8 or 9, I went in to see my dad at work, and he took me into the lab and he gave me a little tour of his workplace. And he showed me this machine, a centrifuge. It was much bigger than this. And it had hundreds of the little test tubes in it. And basically, a centrifuge is this thing that spins round with blood in test tubes. And as it spins round, it goes really fast. And a force jumps into operation when you spin something really fast called centrifugal force. And under the power of this force, centrifugal force, the blood gets separated out into its component parts. And you can do that with loads of things, not just blood. And so this is, an incredible machine, and it means that you can analyze things. You can look at what is in blood and how much cholesterol is in there, how much blood, how much iron, all those sorts of things. So anyway, that was a little memory of mine, and it kind of just got buried back into the recesses of my mind, forgot all about it. 10 years later, I was doing a tour of Cardiff University because I was applying to do a botany degree, a plant science degree. And I was with about 25 people. We were doing a tour of the university, as you do. And they took us into the labs. And there in the middle of this lab with this gleaming, glorious, huge, round machine. And they took the lid off, the tour guide did, this lecturer. And he said, does anyone know what this is? And everyone was totally silent. And then from the recesses of my mind came the information from my dad's tour of his lab 10 years before. And I said, oh, it's a centrifuge, and it spins round, and centrifugal force separates out the stuff that is put in there. And everyone turned to me and they were so impressed, I tell you. And I got into Cardiff University, and here I am to tell the tale. So why on earth am I talking about centrifuges? Well, it's just so that I just want you to picture in your mind what happens when this thing spins round. It spins round really fast under the power of a motor. And as it does, something sort of jumps into play, centrifugal force. And it's a universal global force. Wherever you go in the world, it doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing. If you spin something around super fast, the force kicks in. So has anyone ever picked up a child and spun the child round really fast just for a laugh? Yeah? What happens to their feet? They sort of go out, don't they? They sort of spin out. That's centrifugal force. Has anyone ever used a spin dryer to dry your clothes? Yeah? What happens to the water? Goes in from the it goes out to the outer thing, and then it goes down the drain. That's in the washing machine and the spin dryer. That's centrifugal force. And anywhere you go in the world, centrifugal force will operate when you spin something around really fast, and it will push everything out to the edges. Hold that thought. Okay, so back to Mary and Martha. And we're in that scene where Mary and Martha are talking with Jesus. Jesus is in their home, and it looks like Jesus is friends with them, kind of friends off the scenes as well as just in the kind of the big bits of the Gospels. Nobody really knows what Jesus did the Wednesday before his crucifixion. They call it Silent Wednesday in the history of the church because nobody really knows, but they know he was in Bethany. And so most theologians think that Jesus hung out at Mary and Martha's house, his friends, with Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead, and basically kick-started the campaign to get him crucified on 2 days before his crucifixion because he was their friends. And here he is in the home. And I just, basically, when people hang out with Jesus, something happens to them. And if you can read the Gospels as a bit of a whole every now and again and not just home in on one little verse and, pull it apart, you will see that when people are around Jesus, they're on a journey. They're on a journey of transformation. And if they hang in there and they stay with him, then they will be changed, as will you, if you hang in there with Jesus. It is inescapable that if you have a relationship with Jesus, you will be transformed. If you listen to what he says, if you pay attention to what he says and does, if you're tuned in to the way what Jesus thinks and what he says about our world, our life, and the way that things should be, you will change without having to change yourself. You will be transformed. And Laura just read out that brilliant verse from Corinthians. If anyone is in Christ, they're a new creation. The old has gone, the new has come. The reason why that is true is because transformation happens when you're with Jesus. And I actually am totally on the side of Martha. I think Martha is somebody who on this day doesn't get it. Who's been there? Who's not got it? Who missed a moment? Who has missed a moment with God in your life when, moving on a little past it, you might have looked back and thought, "Oh, I missed it. And if I hadn't missed it then, what would I be now?" You know, we miss things all the time. We miss out on little opportunities to grow and transform, become powerful people who are world changers. We miss it all the time because why? Because of what Martha was happening to Martha. Luke says in that gospel, he says she was distracted. What's distraction? Think about your own life for a minute. What things, Barney, honestly, if you could see little Barney, he's so cute down here. Distraction. What are the things that distract you from being the person that you want to be? Think about it now. Okay, I want you to think internally, just on your own, 3 things, 3 big ones in your life that stop you and distract you, push you off course. What are they? Relationships? Anyone single here, desperate for a partner, feeling lonely? Anyone ever been pushed off course by a relationship into something that you never intended to be? What else? Distraction of money. Yeah, money can be pursuing money. There's nothing wrong with money. Paul says it's the love of money that's the root of all evil. Money itself, brilliant thing. But who's been distracted by wanting money and actually finding they've maybe made some compromises for the sake of money? Okay, maybe you're not somebody who's saying, yes, I've chosen a career of being a banker because I don't care about Jesus anymore. But what about telling a lie here and now, every now and again, to make sure that the money in your bank stays in the place it needs to be? Those are the sorts of things that I'm talking about. The distractions, the pulling power of things to pull you away from what you actually want to do and be in your life. There are loads of other things: money, relationships, the internet, boredom, watching stuff that you don't really think you should, but you did. And, you know, you can feel the cooling of your connection to God because of what you've been doing. Distraction is absolutely all around us. And you guys have been distracted this week, haven't you? You haven't quite been the person that you meant to be this week. You've been more irritated, more worried, less focused, more just thinking about all the other things that you can and should and want to do instead of the things that you intended to do. And maybe in a time of worship, you think, oh, Jesus, yeah, you're it. But actually, it's really easy to be distracted. And Luke, when he says this, he uses this word, perispeo. Here's a bit of Greek for you. Do you want to say that with me? Perispeo. So perispeo, if that comes up on the screen, perispeo is a word that Luke uses in that passage to describe the distraction of, sorry, Nick's trying to keep up with my thing. Can you find it? Is it on there? There's a word, it's next one down maybe. Yeah, next one down. There we go, here it is. So that's a bit of Greek. That's made up of 2 components, peri and speo. Peri is a word that means the outside edges. So it's the same word that we get perimeter from. It's that same origin. Speo means pulled by a force. So Luke says Martha was pulled by a distracted, pulled by a force to the outer edges instead of to the center. That's how Luke describes it. And in fact, when Jesus comes to Martha and he says, Martha, you're worried and upset about things, he actually uses words that say, you've got a riot going on in your soul. The word upset that he uses there actually is the same word they use for a riot later on in the New Testament. And what that passage is basically saying is the power of things to distract us is like a centrifugal force. And it pushes us to the outer edges of what we have chosen and want to be at the core of our lives. And you are under that power now. It's even the cold. It's slightly harder to listen to me in the freezing cold and the things that are going on, the noise. There's just this endless, constant power of distraction in the world. That is the system that we're living in. And Luke talks about these two women, one of whom on this day get it and the other doesn't, because one is distracted and one is not. And I just want you to just sort of pause for thought, really, and just think, what do we do about distraction? Because it's not going away. The reality is the things that pull you away from your relationship with Jesus and your desire to follow him wholeheartedly are not going away. And you need to note what are the things that pull you and understand the power of that force. You need to understand that there is an enemy abroad in the world. The Bible is very clear that there is an enemy of your soul. Jesus said he goes and sows seeds in the night that will grow up into weeds in your life. He is prowling around like a lion, wanting to devour you. He is a tempter. He sometimes comes as an angel of light. The Bible is clear about that as well. So distractions sometimes seem lovely, but there is a power and a force that is significant that wants to pull you away to the perimeter and get you to lose your focus and get you away from what? Being a focused person? Being on track for everything? Doing everything perfectly? No. The focus is meant to be relating to Jesus, walking with him, knowing him, just being with him. Mary was not doing anything that fantastic. She was just sitting down and listening. That's the opposite of the force. It's not being a holy, dedicated person with perfect things going on in your life so everyone looks at you and admires you. Nothing, not that at all. The answer, the opposite of the power that you can't get away from, is simply sitting and listening. And actually what happens is that, well, I want to just challenge you. Are you on that journey of transformation? Because actually you will be transformed if you keep on coming back to that one central thing, that if you relate your days, your hours, your moments, your walk through life to Jesus, and you talk with him and you walk with him and you pause every now and again. It doesn't have to be some special, amazing way of living. It actually just means to have a relationship with Jesus where you listen. Are you listening? Like every day? Are you listening? Are you chatting to God about the things that are happening to you in just a simple way of listening and focusing? And are you aware of the battle for your soul and your attention? Are you aware? Because it's hard, isn't it? Now, I just want to say that in some ways that story kind of just sums up the battle that we're in. And actually what's going on with Martha is one of her distractions, I think, is performance orientation. And this is just little thing here. I just think all of us are really subject to this thing of I've got to get this right and I've got to look good and I've got to get my house in order. I've got to get everything so that it looks like I'm really spiritual and together. And Martha wants her home to be together. I know what that feels like. It's kind of like a battle, especially in community. It's a massive battle. This performance orientation is something that is really, really hard to get away from. And the comparison trap, comparing myself with other people, there's another distraction. She or he seems to be doing better than me. Jesus, can't you see that Mary needs to come and help me? It's all those things she gets sucked into. But Bill Johnson said, Martha, the problem is that Martha is making sandwiches for Jesus that he hasn't ordered. That's the real problem. She just missed the moment. She's making sandwiches that he didn't order. But just want to finish. I want to sort of move on now and sort of come to a third point, really. And that is that I think Martha got it in the end. I think that she didn't get it that day. But like I said, anyone who walks with Jesus is on a journey of transformation. And the next time you see Martha is in the Lazarus scene. What happens before the bit that we read is that Lazarus has died, and they send word to Jesus, and he arrives at their home, and Martha runs out to meet him, and she has this moment on her own with Jesus that she must have recounted to the gospel writers afterwards. No one else is there. Mary is in the house. The mourners are there. The house is full of people mourning Lazarus. Martha runs out to meet Jesus, and on her own, she has this moment, and it is a moment in the Gospels, which is incredible because he treats her to one of the great I am statements of Jesus. And so what happens is she meets him on the road and she says, Jesus, if you had been here, Lazarus wouldn't have died. That's a statement of faith, isn't it? I believe that when you're there, Jesus, death cannot happen. And but she says, then she follows it up with this little thing and she says, but even now, I know that God will give you anything you ask. Even now, something could happen that would change even death. So Martha, she gets it. She gets that the presence of Jesus is the answer to even death. Her brother has been dead for 4 days and he's going off in the tomb. But she gets it that this man has arrived, and because of that, anything could happen. Even possibly, she's playing in her mind with the idea of death itself being reversed. It's Kim's story of, that her dad, he actually died and he was resuscitated. And he was on the edge, the brink, hovering between life and death. And everyone's praying because why? Because Jesus reverses death. And he brings healing when no one else can heal, when the doctors, who are totally amazing, and they got machines that can go down your throat and look inside your body. They're that amazing. But Jesus, the presence of Jesus, is what brings life. And Martha gets it. So she says this thing to Jesus, and he says, next slide, he says, what does he say? Next one. No, yeah, go on. Keep going. Keep going down. Okay, it might be about there. No, next one down. It's very hard for Nick because he can't actually see what these things are. Jesus basically says to her, I am the resurrection and the life. And he who believes in me, even though he dies, he will live forever. Do you believe this? And Martha says, I believe. Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God who is coming into the world. That little phrase, coming into the world, means I believe you're the Messiah, because it was a well-known Jewish phrase that meant the one who is coming into the world. It was kind of like the hope of all the Jews. One day, there's someone, God will come into the world. He will arrive on the planet. There was this belief there, he coming into the world. So she's saying, I believe you're that one. You're God. You've come into the world. And right now, anything is possible. And so Martha gets it. And she gets this incredible statement from Jesus. Then she sees it all roll out. And it's totally amazing. Where's Mary? Mary's in the house weeping with all the mourners who don't believe. And she don't get to hear the incredible statement of Jesus. And really, her faith is not part of the story of the raising of Lazarus, but Martha's is. Because there are some personalities that lend themselves to sitting at the feet of Jesus and find it easier to be contemplative and a bit passive, and some are a bit more active and they find that those things harder. And the reality is you have a personality type that makes some things easier for you and some things harder in your journey with God. Some of you find it easier to sit and read. Some of you want to be activists. Whoever you are, you should be on a journey of transformation. So whatever it looks like, there's, for Mary, I think she was a bit stuck. She didn't, when she finally sees Jesus, she just said, if you'd been here, Lazarus wouldn't have died. She doesn't say the thing, but even now. So I'm just saying that to challenge you, that you might know what your personality type takes you towards. Maybe you're a bit of an activist and you know that the power of distraction will mean that you'll find it hard to sit and listen. But you need to go on that journey, because when the moment comes, you will have a moment where you are required to believe and say something like, even now, I know all things are possible. I know something can change. Like Kim and her family, there will be a moment coming soon where you are required to say something that actually activates faith and all the things that can happen, reversing death, bringing the future into the present and believing in Jesus. And there will be another moment for you activists where actually you've got to shut up and stop. And you will be required to listen and go against the grain, the powerful centrifugal force that is pushing you into distraction and stopping you and getting you to miss it. And so I just want to challenge you to be awake and pay attention, because we are, we're coming out of lockdown. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what's happened to the church in the last year? It could be half the size that it was a year ago. But the world and culture and people that we know are desperate for life and meaning and purpose and someone who can reverse death, someone who can bring healing. And you and I are called to be carriers of that hope and to know the moment that we're in, to know what is required, whether it's to shut up or speak up. And unless we're paying attention, unless we're walking with God, unless we're really awake, then we're going to miss it over and over again, and we won't be part of the great story. So we're going to take communion together. And what I suggest we do, just to finish, is to kind of make that internal restating of our promise, our desire, our intention to pay attention, to walk with God, and to not miss our moments. That's all I want us to do. And by doing that, when you take communion, you're remembering the death of Jesus, his body broken for you, his blood shed for you. It's incredibly important. It's not something to be taken lightly. Paul in the New Testament says, don't take this if you're not going to examine yourself. Don't do it. Because some of you are doing that and you've brought sickness upon yourself. That's in Corinthians. So, what that means is a bit of a mystery. But, when you take communion, it's like saying, I'm remembering this incredibly pivotal moment in human history. And as I take it, I am coming back again to you, God, and saying, I am paying attention. I am awake to what you want to do in my life. And I don't want to miss the moments that you put before me. I don't want to miss them. I want to be awake and ready and alert. Okay, and it's up to you what you make of it. But as we take communion, I'm just going to pray. I'm going to pray over the bread and the juice, whatever you've got, will be to you a life-giving, powerful memory and recognition of what the body of Jesus and the blood of Jesus means. It means that transformation is possible. So I just pray, Father God, for us as a community, those online and the people in the room now. Jesus, it's really difficult to stay awake sometimes. There's so many things that are distracting us, so many things that make this difficult. And yet we want to rise to the challenge of being ready for our moment. Whether it's the moment of Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus and knowing what was important, or the moment of Martha being ready to declare something that was part of the reversal of death. We don't want to miss those moments. I pray for every person here listening that you would literally come with divine power to awaken our souls so that we are ready for what is next. Come, Holy Spirit, I pray. Come, breath of God. Come with life. Come with focus. Speak to us, I pray. Somebody want to just grab the cup and the bread and wine so I can just hold it. So if you've got